All right. Good evening. This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 235 of Within the Trenches, a podcast based on the experience of being an Iowan dispatcher. We are recording live, audio and video, actually, from our home. This is my wife, Rebecca.
Hey.
Hi. I was going to say, they can see you on video, but they wouldn't be able to hear you on the audio.
I have words.
Through your hands. And you can't actually see him, but our 14-year-old son, Logan, is here as well. Or maybe you can see his long, gangly fingers.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
He's actually doing homework right now at the dinner table while we're doing this. And it might be good, actually, because he might be able to jump in and answer a couple of things about what we're going to talk about today for this episode. You were on an episode with me a while back. Was that almost a year ago now, do you think? Or how long ago was it that we did that episode?
It might have been more than a year ago.
Holy crap.
Around a year, yeah.
I don't even remember now, but it was a while ago. We did an episode because we were talking about, and this was just in just driving around in conversation, talking about how it was for Rebecca when I was in dispatch, what it was like for her, what it was like for Logan, and just kind of dealing with me being in dispatch all the time and coming home and just kind of being a drone, kind of shutting people out because I didn't know in the beginning how to let it out. It wasn't until I was going to school, I think, and doing the projects more that I started talking about it more because that was my therapy. And
well, I think that it wasn't that you weren't talking about dispatch. It's that you weren't talking about the hard stuff that you were dealing with dispatch.
Right. And I was telling you the calls. I was telling you the stories, but I wasn't expressing any feeling from there, just telling you all the hard calls because then, later on, you hear all the funny stories that I had, but I never told you any of those.
Yeah. And it was kind of glossed over, I think. The hard stories, like you were saying, it was just kind of, this is what happened. It was really hard. And then that was it. But I think that some of that too is because that I internalize stuff like that. I would not make a good dispatcher. I would be like, out 2 calls in and I'm done.
You do all the funny, crazy ones, but when I got to the real deep, hard ones, I can see that. Yeah. But it was hard. And everything, I did it for 13 and a half years, and there was definitely a lot more when we moved back to Michigan, because towards the end of my career or dispatch job in Florida was when we got together, but there wasn't, like, the call volume wasn't the same. The amount of hard calls, types of things that went on in a small city wasn't really there.
You got 4-wheelers that were driving on the road. Calls.
Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah, people drunk
surprised.
On 4-wheelers and people calling in noise complaints about Mexican music, and and then the lady ends up saying, "Do you know this type of Mexican music?" And I said, "Yeah, because I am Mexican." And then she goes, "What's your name?" And I said, "Ricardo." And she says, "You don't sound like a Ricardo."
Yeah.
So those, weird calls like that.
Yeah, those aren't really the deep phone calls that you got once we were in Michigan.
It would, but the one call that I did get that will stay with me for the rest of my life, that was there in Florida in the beginning, and it was before you and I met, when I first started out my dispatch career, was the suicide call. And every time we go back to Florida, because her family lives in Florida, that's where we met, and her parents are there, and some of her siblings, and then my mom and my siblings are there, my sisters rather, and every time we're there, I don't know what it is, but I feel like I always have to go back and just kind of step in the area of where the dispatch center was. Going back to my roots. And I did this in a video that I posted last week. I was at the the Standards and Best Practices Conference in Orlando. And I went back and just went back to my roots. I felt like I needed to go there and do it. And it's all right. You don't have to be that quiet.
The boy child is trying to creep quietly away.
Right. So I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because even though I didn't know the person who committed suicide, the wife, I had that connection with her because she was there with me, and I was talking with her through all of it. So that was the biggest and probably hardest call during that time that I was there. But it was when we moved back to Michigan, that's when a lot of those calls were really, really deep.
Well, and I think that even if they weren't something life-threatening that was happening, you were taking a lot of calls from people that you knew. They didn't know who you were necessarily.
Right.
Just from the phone call, because it's like, you're not like, oh, hey, it's me.
Yeah.
But
hey, we went to high school. Remember me?
Yeah.
I know your business.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think
it was not like that.
That it was a little bit harder for you because you knew these people and you knew what they were going through. I remember at one point you took, I think you took the call for a girl you went to high school with and her house burned. Mm-hmm. And you took the call, and it's, those are hard ones. Taking calls from your tias, your aunts, mm-hmm. and just people that makes it more personal.
Right.
Made it more personal for you. And so I think that some of those, even if they weren't life threatening, hit you in a different way.
And I think it was because there were a couple times where I actually saw them face to face later on, and they would say, "Oh, you don't believe what happened to me," and I have to play dumb a little bit because I didn't want them to know it was me. And but I know the whole story because I took the call. I remember them screaming about their home and all this other stuff, and it sticks with you. It's hard to get through that, and then coming home and you asking how work went, and do I tell her? And sometimes I did, and sometimes I didn't. Sometimes when I came home, because it was midnight shift, I would be grilling a steak at 5 a.m.
There is nothing like hearing sounds on your deck and going, oh my gosh, who's on the deck? And then suddenly smelling food cooking. I mean, what is going on? And then realizing that your husband is outside grilling a steak with about 2 feet of snow on the deck as well.
It's not going to stop me. I was hungry. I was hungry. And it also helped me sleep. Stuff in my face with steak and eggs. And I mean, that's the way it was throughout that whole time. And then going to school full time, all at the same time, and coming home and the amount of overtime. And then
it was a lot of overtime.
I remember one time coming home, and I think I did a 1-to-1 shift, and I got forced in for a shift at 9 a.m. And at that time, we lived further than Zeeland. We were living on the far north side of Holland. And so I don't know, it was an hour? I don't know. It was a lot. It was further than Zeeland. And I remember coming home and sleeping on the couch because I didn't want to wake you up. And Logan had to be maybe 2, something like that, maybe. I don't remember how old he was, but I remember being on the couch. I only slept for 2 hours and then had to go straight back.
I was going to say we moved from that when he was just a few months old.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, that's how messed up I was in the timeline there, how much I worked. I don't even know where we were living at the time. But it was one time specifically that I remember coming home and sleeping on the couch for a few hours and then going straight back. And then after that, I would stay the night at dispatch. And sometimes staying the night at dispatch, I would get forced over for another shift. And that just would kill us because we could never plan anything.
No.
We couldn't go to a lot of get-togethers. We missed a lot together.
We got invited to lots of things that we couldn't go to. And I mean, technically I could have gone by myself, but for a long time we just had one car.
Right.
And so
Yep.
it would have been more of a hassle for me to take you all the way to work
Right.
and then come back and do whatever I was doing and then have to get up really early in the morning to go back.
Yeah, 4 in the
and get
morning to go and
you.
get me by 4:30. Yeah.
Because we did that once for something that I had going on and I forgot to get, no, your family was in town maybe. And so I had the car so that I could go to something and you were like,
I remember that now.
are you there? And I'm like, yeah. And you're like, because I don't see the car out here. I was like, I'm coming, jumping up out of bed and
I remember that.
having to drive
Oh, yep.
over there.
And I remember sitting in the little lobby of the dispatch center so that nobody knew that I was still in the building, just in case someone called in at the last second or something.
Well, and I think that when you called, I wasn't late yet. Like
Oh,
you had
okay.
called, you had told me to come earlier in case someone came and relieved you earlier,
Yeah,
so that
yeah,
you could
that's
get
what it
just
was.
so that you could just leave.
Right.
And so I think I still made it by the time of your technical end of shift.
Either way, it's funny.
But
Oh, I kind of forgot about that. That's funny
was-
that happened. But yeah, there was a lot of stuff like that. And
birthdays were really hard.
yeah, birthdays, Christmas. There would be times where, because I worked midnight shift all the time, so there would be times where I would work that midnight shift, or that one time that I worked 18 hours on Christmas Eve, then came home and went straight into Christmas time and Christmas breakfast, and then went to sleep. And I don't remember if that day I did have to go back into dispatch.
You did.
Ugh.
But I think that it was a Wednesday, and Wednesdays for you were shorter.
Yes. So it wasn't until later
But-
than probably.
Because I
and
feel like it was a
4-hour shift
shorter,
or something.
yeah, it was a shorter day, but it was still like we had to do everything. And then
But we were like
left.
roommates.
were we? You were like the creepy guy who was there when I was.
I was the guy on the couch. If you've ever watched Half Baked, then you know what I'm talking about. I was the guy on the couch pretty much because I was never there. And it's funny talking about this because I don't know if you're, Logan, if you're nodding your head yes, like in agreement, or if you're bobbing
He's
your head to
listening
music.
Both. Because all of this is, from what I remember, yeah, this is.
Yeah. Well, and there were times when I think it was when you went to Days for a little while.
Yeah, there was about a
And-
6-month stint there.
Logan saw you when you took him to school. No, you
No,
picked him up.
I would
You
pick
would
him
pick
up.
him up from school. And so the ride home from school, which we lived like a half a mile from the school, that was the drive. That was the amount of time that he would get to spend for
Right.
some of the days, because that was
That was it.
he was gone. He was gone before he went to school. And then, no, that's not right. You were, how did it work?
No, it was actually the midnight shift because I worked 4:30 to 4:30. So I would get home, I would go to sleep, I would take like a cat nap, and I would wake up enough time to take him to
That's
school,
right, that's
come
right.
back and go to sleep or run errands or whatever. And then I would go and pick him up from school, bring him home, and then drive straight to work right after
Yeah.
that.
So it was like
I would see
really-
him twice
Yeah.
out of the day.
Really short.
That's how that one worked.
Really short.
Yeah.
I get confused because there was the time when you barely saw Logan, and then there was the times where I needed you to go back to midnights because you were messing with my midnight routines.
That's right. Well, it was during that daytime. So, oh my God. Okay.
We
So-
argued so much during the daytimes.
So we're thinking this is going to be good, right? Because we're going to have time where we're going to spend the day together or to do whatever, or the evening rather, because I was working days. So we're thinking the evening's going to be good. We're going to be there for dinner and this and that. And then I find myself putting the dishes in the dishwasher wrong.
Not that they were wrong. You were just in my way. Like I had my
because I mean
system.
that was your thing. You had a system going, right? And I remember you saying you need to either go back to nights or you need to just go do something else.
Go sit down.
Go sit down. And I wanted to help, but I obviously
he did. He wanted to help so bad. And it was very, I mean, and like we were arguing and I'm like, why are we arguing so much? And I realized that it was because he was just messing things up.
Right.
Like, no, it is bedtime. What are you doing? Why are you playing with him right now? That is not what's supposed to be happening.
Yeah, it's supposed to be time for him to crash. And I'm like, come on, let's play. It's like, this is not the way it
And then
works.
he's like, hey, do you want to watch this with me? And I'm like, that's not what we watch.
Well, not just that. Do you remember when I started on days, that first night, I crashed out at like 7:45, and you went and laid down next to me. And I remember you saying, do you want to talk? And I said, no, I got to go to sleep. And then you laid there for a minute. And I remember you specifically saying, why am I going to sleep? I don't need to go to sleep right now.
Yeah.
And you're like, deuces. And you split.
I did get up.
But that was also during that same time in the beginning of days when I think it was, what?
Me and Lola take after you guys. Whenever she does something that I don't like, I'm just, you need to go somewhere else.
We're being compared to children right
yes,
now.
Logan. Yeah,
You're
Logan.
more sure about it than me.
It's fine, guys.
I think it was Easter maybe, or it had to have been Easter. I know it was it was a holiday, and I woke up late. Remember, I had put my phone on airplane mode, and it was morning time, and I woke up out of a dead sleep, and I remember gasping really loud, and I jumped up and I looked at my phone, and it was 4:15, and I was supposed to be at work already. Or no, it was almost 4:30 and I was supposed to be there already. And I started freaking out. And I remember, I don't know why I woke you up, but I woke you up and you're going, what? I said, I'm late. You're like, what? I said, I remember getting my phone and going, look at the time.
I don't remember that.
And well, you were half awake, but I remember getting my phone off of airplane mode, and all of these messages start coming in, and I call in the dispatch, and my coworker picks up, and she goes, Ricardo? And I said, yes. And she goes, did you oversleep? And I said, yes. And she's just busting up laughing. And I said, I will get there as fast as I can. And I did get there. And exactly, the white rabbit with the clock. I'm late. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Logan.
They were always really patient with you. It didn't happen very often, but you were always willing to take shifts for people if they needed it. So
yeah, I mean, I was always willing to switch, but
they cut you some slack when you were late.
Oh man,
and it really didn't happen.
It makes me sweat now thinking about it. Jeez,
I can only remember it happening like once or twice
out of my whole time.
Yeah, you were like. I remember a couple times that I had to call you in because you were sick and you're like, no, I can't call in. You can't. I can't. I need to be there.
Right.
I can't call in. I'm like,
I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be that guy.
Speak. Like,
it's true. It's true. But all of that, has led us to, where we're at today. We learned a lot, and I learned a lot. I finally started opening up and we were talking more. And with the projects that I was doing in school, I was able to share a lot of what was going on. It started out me writing about it, and that was therapeutic. We talked about it. People really got into it, and they started learning more. And then the podcast, and just from there, going to work where I work now with my 9 to 5, and all of that leading up to just a few weeks ago when Rebecca and I were talking. And one of the things that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I kind of did it, I was kind of doing it already, but I wasn't being consistent with it. But what I wanted to do was to continue to generate some sort of discussion on the podcast page. So we're talking about it, and she says, why don't you just ask more questions that are engaging? And I said, I've done that before, but I'm not it's not really getting out there. Like people are answering, but it hasn't gone that much further. I said, what do you think that would be a good question? And then she came up with the question of, what is one thing that you could tell your family
You wish your family knew about dispatch.
Yeah, that you wish your family knew about your job at 911 dispatch. And I thought that is a great question. And we were wondering how that would go over. And we thought about it for a couple days, and I hadn't done anything with it, and then finally threw it out there just to see what people would say. And it blew up on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook. There were hundreds of responses that were sent in from people, and they're powerful responses, but it also shows that they're kind of in the same, all of them are in the same, situations, kind of how we were at, where we're trying to figure out how to communicate. We want, as dispatch, for our family to know certain things, but sometimes it's hard to tell them because it's a difficult subject.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised when I started reading some of the responses. I honestly did not expect it to get as many responses as it did, but I was really surprised, and I shouldn't have been, by how much these comments and stories kind of things tie into the hashtag I am 911.
Right.
Like, this is not clerical work.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's not what it is.
We've got these powerful I am 911 stories with these difficult calls, but then it goes beyond that. And I think these are even deeper, where, dispatchers are talking about the calls and how it affects them. But this goes deeper into their own personal lives with their families. And I was talking to some of the admins about it, and even they were saying, do these seem way deeper than the other stories, which are all, very important, but this is a whole different side.
The I am 911.
Right.
I think those are, it's because those stories I think are from a distance. Mm-hmm. And these are,
it's a different type of connection.
Opening up an internal piece of yourself to the world to kind of let them know. And it's interesting that, maybe interesting isn't the right word, but it's interesting that that these are things that people have a hard time opening up to their families,
right?
Even, and yeah,
they've
dispatch
all
is not an easy career choice,
right? But it's definitely a calling for those who do it.
Yeah.
There's not many people who can do this job, and for those who do this job, you're amazing, all of you.
Absolutely.
One of the, I'm gonna read some of these here, but this one really kind of got me when it came in. And there's a lot of them that are like this, but this one says, "My heart aches for all the special events I've missed. There are no do-overs. I'd be there if I could. I miss you." And then it's hashtag I am 911, hashtag if I could tell you one thing. And these responses continue to come in over and over and over, and people are sharing them. And what's even more crazy, and I don't know if you've seen it, but in some of the comments, whether it be on Instagram or Facebook or retweets on Twitter, people are tagging, I can only assume, their family members or even friends, and they're saying, "Hey, tag so-and-so, at so-and-so, I want you to read this, this series, so that you understand more about my job and what I go through." And it's...
Well, I think that sometimes it's easier to have it coming from somewhere else where you don't have to open yourself up as much. Because I think that as dispatchers, sometimes they have to stay a little bit closed off. Not
Right.
completely. I think that talking and getting it out there and, all of that is wonderful. But I
Right,
think
it's the way to go.
to some extent, I think that there's a fear that if you maybe let it out, you won't be able to do the job anymore.
Yeah, and that's that stigma that, we've got to battle against and break completely, because I was that person as well, where I didn't talk about it because I thought I would be seen as weak. and that people would think I couldn't do the job or whatever.
It's not
that I
weakness, it's human.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's being human. And that's what all of this is about. And here's another one here. And it says, sometimes I just need a hug. I don't need your questions. I don't need your advice. I don't need you to compare your experiences to mine. And then in parentheses, for the family members that have been first responders. And then it goes on to say, I want someone to let me feel their warmth and their love after I've been through hell at work. I just need a hug. There's a lot of them in here that are like that. And this one, talking about protecting their own, it says, I don't tell you my stories not because I don't want to share, but because I don't want you to live with the ugliness that humanity treats towards each other. I protect my officers, but I'll protect my own too. And
that one reminds me of when we were getting ready to move at some point, and we were looking at a place that was in the county that you were dispatching in. And like at the last minute, I was like, I can't live where you're coming home and telling me the stories about what's going on.
Right.
There. Like, I will never feel safe ever again. Like, I can't do it. And so we ended up not doing that. And we always just lived in the county next to it. But that's what that reminded me of.
Oh man,
like,
yeah.
bring it.
That takes me back. Yeah, I remember that as well. This other one here says, after hearing so much family drama and so much trauma, sometimes I don't know how to act around normal people. I can so relate to that. And in this job, there's so much crap that you deal with and so many different calls that come in that you become suspect of everyone. And I say this because even now, I've been out of dispatch for 5.5 years, and will semi-jokingly, when people are walking by, I'll say, "Oh, they're up to no good," and she'll say, "What? They're just walking by," and
he'll call out license plate numbers.
Man, I haven't done that in a while.
Don't tell lies.
Okay, maybe a little bit, maybe a few times,
or like landmarks and things, and I'm like, "What are you doing? We know where we are."
It's ingrained in me that I have to do that. It just because I know that anything can happen at any time in the world through working in 911 and taking all these calls. I feel like I always have to know exactly where we're at, crossroads, if I ever have to call for any reason. So
that's why I need you with me if we ever need to call for any reason, because I'll be like, I am on the highway and there is traffic in both directions.
Okay, ma'am. But where are you? I don't know.
There's a tree and a median.
And that's about it.
I've gotten, since we've moved here. Ooh, I just hit that. Since we moved here, I've gotten much better about that, because everything is like, that's how you know. So where do you live? I live northwest. I live. Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely helped out a little bit there. And I think the camera turned off.
Yeah, that's what
Stand by.
I heard a clicking. I thought it was just taking a candid shot. Dead air.
It goes 30 minutes.
And it starts again?
Yeah,
you can start it
I
again?
can start it again.
Oh, that's good.
And we're back.
Actually recording now.
No, it is. I hit the button on there.
Check the light is blinking.
It is blinking.
We're good.
Thank you, buddy.
You do your homework.
It's taking like 5 minutes for this printer to connect.
So one of these other things, responses rather, that has come in, it says, sometimes we just need silence. No phones, no TV, no communication, just silence. We are hammered all day long with so many people needing our immediate attention that we need some time to decompress. And I have definitely felt like that, but I also, during that time, felt like I can't, because I've been away from you guys so long. I can't just shut down. And sometimes we'd come home and we'd go run errands, or we'd go do something, or I'd be half awake, but we would be at the park.
Yeah, and it was hard for me to allow you that time because, I mean, most of the time I felt like a single parent, and I'm like, okay, well, oh, good, you're home. Now I get a break.
Right, yes.
But never thinking, okay, he needs a bigger break than I do. But I actually think that one is for anyone.
Yeah.
No matter what you are doing with your life, sometimes you just need quiet and you need to decompress.
Yes.
I think that we would all be a lot better off if we took
we
that
could have
advice.
a little bit of time. Another one here says, I dislike crowds now. I need silence now when I never needed it before. Long stories are also hard for me to listen to. I do not want to talk about my job at all. And I get that. I definitely get that. I find myself doing that when I have to call and I'm talking to somebody in customer service and they're trying to go through this whole thing, and I'm thinking, I just need you to get to the point really quick. Or during those times is also when I'll use phonetics. When they say, can you spell this out? And I'll spell it, but I'll use the phonetics and everything.
Too, don't you?
I get a little sassy, a little spicy sometimes. Yes.
I was gonna say, you're saying that you understand that and like you get short and stuff, but when you tell stories,
this is true.
You put in so much detail that I'm like, I don't need to know what his name is. I don't know him. I will never meet him. It does not matter to me.
In the middle or at the end of the story, that name will make sense.
Again, with the lies.
So it was, it was very eye-opening to see all of these stories that have come in. And there's been about 22 that I've been able to post because so many have been coming in. I've taken a lot of screenshots. So for those who are listening, if you sent in a response for this hashtag of if I could tell you one thing, I'm getting to them and I'm trying to post them as fast as I can. They come in, I just throw them on a different color background and just post them up and post them up and post them up. There are, again, tons and comments on Facebook and Instagram that I try to pick them up as fast as I can. So if you did put one out there, I apologize for the delay, but they will all be added on there. And we've been kind of talking about a book. There was somebody on Instagram who said, you should put these all in a book that we would be able to hand out to our family members or friends or whatever so that they can understand. So that's something that we've been kind of talking about as well, is actually going through and doing that, and you writing the foreword, because, I mean, you came up with the question, and I mean, what was the inspiration on that as we were talking about, putting you on the spot? I mean, actually,
it's like, let's just roll with it. We'll figure it out.
That's right.
Cool.
No, everything that we talked about right now is kind of the inspiration of where this question came from.
Yeah, it really was. And I mean, we had originally just been talking about how to get, oh my gosh, what's the word?
Discussion generated?
Yeah, some discussion going. That's not the word I was looking for. But we were talking about that, and I guess for a while, and I brought it up a couple times just kind of in passing, that I think that I realize that the podcast is primarily about just the dispatchers, but I feel like there's so much that the families don't know or friends don't know and don't understand about dispatch. And I know for me, it was really hard to not understand where he was coming from or why he was coming home and like snapping at me. Like, I had nothing. I had nothing to do with what your day was, but not realizing that, he would come home and tell me stories, but he would tell me like one story when that whole shift could have been full of just one after another after another. And he's been pounded all day, and I never understood where he was coming from or why he was even coming at me like that. And so I've told him a few times, that I feel like it's so important for the families to be able to understand. And since you have listenership who are non-dispatch, that they needed a more personal take on it, not the stories of someone else, but the stories of them.
Right.
That was kind of a deeper look inside of the mentality of a dispatcher instead of the things that they deal with from other people. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
I hope that makes sense.
If not, you can send us an email at. No, that was good.
Keep it to yourself.
Yeah, no, that's all about it right there. That's what this is about, and we're going to continue to post more questions like this. But
don't stop answering this one.
yes,
If you haven't yet, please do, because it matters.
It definitely does, and there's so many more that continue to come in, because there are some people who haven't responded in their own way to that specific question, but they've been responding to other people's responses, if that makes sense, on this whole topic. And if you're one who's just been commenting, I'm sure you'll be one of those who ends up sharing your piece of it as well. And I'm not adding any names onto any of these posts. It's just the response that's going on there, as well as the 2 hashtags of I am 911 and if I could tell you one thing.
I just want to say, if you never do post it, just know that we see you.
That's right. We see you and we hear you, because this whole experience has been an amazing one. Not just the whole I am 911 movement, but the response to this question alone has been very powerful and eye-opening. And we see and hear that people you're not alone, and that's also what this is all about. But and people are, in a way, hurting a little bit, but I think by sharing this, they're also healing from it as well. So like she said, continue to answer, the question and get it out there and share with your family, share with your friends. And, cause that's how we're going to be there for each other.
Yeah. And I think that it's important to know that you are supported. Even if you never ever comment on anything, on any of your stuff. Is it our stuff? Or is it your stuff? I don't know. that even if you never comment, that we still got your back.
That's right.
And we still know that you're out there, and we got you.
So as we go into the wrap up of this episode, Logan, do you have anything to say as a son of dispatch?
Honestly, not really.
All right.
He was.
What?
It's all he ever knew.
That's
for
true.
a really long time.
Can't miss what you never had. And that's kind of sad.
God.
That is kind of sad. Yeah.
Wow.
But
That was deep, dude.
that is true.
It is. No, yes.
That's right. Yeah. You do have me now. Man.
Now I do have it. So you know what? I'm happy with what I have now.
Yeah.
Good.
I don't think that he ever realized that was not normal.
Oh, no, I realized it at a very early age that it was not normal. But I figured, you know what? Makes me interesting.
But I don't think that you realized that wasn't like inside of a home what it actually looks like outside of dispatch.
That was our normal.
Yeah, because
that's what our
that's just
normal
what we
was.
did. And so it was eye-opening when we moved here for you, because you were like, why is he home? Like, well, he lives here.
Yeah, when I had the 9 to 5, or the switch to the 9 to 5. Yeah, exactly.
It was really different.
Mm-hmm.
Even now, sometimes I'm always like, oh, yeah, he's back.
Yeah.
I forgot.
Jeez, that's
True. We went from one to the other.
one extreme to
Maybe
the other.
we should wrap this up now.
But again, please continue to answer that question, as well as sharing your stories for the I Am 911 movement. There's a lot that's coming. There's a lot of big things that are going to be going on as we go into the rest of this year. I mean, we're going into conference season, and there are going to be a bunch of conferences that I'm going to. I'm going to be in Texas doing Imagine Listening sessions, as well as doing the podcast there. I'm going to be at WIPSCOM in Wisconsin. I'm going to be their closing speaker and telling my story, as well as doing an Imagine Listening session, National NINA Conference, the Navigator Conference, both of those, doing the podcast and Imagine Listening. So there's a lot of big things that are coming on, and I just thank you all for the support and for listening. And thank you very much for being on this episode. She did a crazy workout today and is dying right now. It's 9 o'clock, so it's past her bedtime.
I'm so tired. I told him was it 6:30?
Something like that.
Like, I'm ready for bed. Like, I could go to bed right now.
Exactly. So for those who are listening, for those who are watching, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can like us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/Within the Trenches Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @911podcast. This episode, along with all the others, can be heard 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, your favorite podcasting app, as well as withinthetrenches.net. And as always, this episode is supported by INdigital, a leader in next-gen core services.